Blessed ones, peace and praise. I had to call it audible, all hands on deck. I wasn't even going to record today, but I have at this point made this my personal journal, diary, whatever if you will. Um, I wanna give a shout out to Charlemagne, his interview with Young Miami, Clarissa, Clarisha, please. Was good interview. I wanted to give Young Miami her flowers. Just as far as like her growth. Like me, I'm personally not a City Girls fan. I don't really follow them as much, but I am familiar with the music. I'm familiar with her, and I'm definitely familiar with Charlemagne. I am a Charlemagne fan. I want to give a shout out to him. I also want to give a shout out to Cameron, Talk with Flea, and J. Cole. They had another phenomenal interview. I think a lot of people I think a lot of people who are J. Cole fans definitely appreciated it. And I also want to give a shout out to I don't know the particularly know the gentleman's name that interviewed Jay Z. I want to say let me look it up real quick because I want to particularly give a shout out to him because again GQ which is which is a big brand. I want to I probably should have had a more prepared 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 segment for this, but want to say Fraser Tarp. Shout out to Fraser Tarp GQ for the Jay Z interview. Now, I had made it clear that certain things I don't feel like need to be addressed because again it's like a repetitive cycle. Everybody's going to have their views and opinions. Everybody's going to have their perspective. Everybody's going to have their insight. People can say, there's no right or wrong. Everything is subjective. Everything is, based on your own logic, and I feel that. I get it. I I received that. I acknowledge that. But it just bothers me. It bothers me how a lot of these content creators, influencers, or these platforms, whether it's a whole group of people, one person, or a duo. Now, I felt obligated to share something. And this is, I have don't often, address these things anymore on podcasts, but like I said, this has to be my personal journal, and I wanted to give some insight on how I look at hip hop. You know, you can feel how you want to feel about Jay Z. I first want to, talk about that. And a lot of people majority of people, maybe just a lot of people, respects him. Of course, as a rapper, and then as a businessman. And there was something in particular that he had said that have a lot of people talking. Now, I I haven't heard all of what people have said, but there's particular people who I do listen to, often, like Rory Maul podcast, who I'm currently listening to their podcast right now, and then even Mr. Met. I am a I am a part time mechanic. I'm gonna just put it that way. So shout out to Rory and Maul. Shout out to Mecca. So those two in particular guys had said something that really made me like side eye. Like, now, those of you who know, um, Mecca, he is A&R, former A&R. You know, he used to work for the Source. He actually raps. He's actually pretty dope too. He's a hip hop head for real. And he does Mechanism Munzons on Instagram. And he used to be one of the I don't want to say host, but he used to be part of this team, Jump Off TV. With Low, Valerie Laura, um, Jazz Fly. Rest in peace to her. Like, I've been following him since then. So this was like years ago. And like I said, I've been following him since then. But he had said something particularly the same thing that Rory and Maul had said in regards to what Jay-Z had said as far as, you know, battle rap. Now, where I will say what Jay-Z was incorrect at, and again, he's solidified in the game, but hip hop, four pillars: graffiti, MCing, not battling, MCing, breakdancing, and DJing. Those are the four pillars of hip hop. Hip hop is over 40 years now, and it's still a young genre, if you ask me. But he had talked about how now today in 2026, that battle rap isn't needed as far as just what it brings, because it's a lot of things, a lot of things we got to remember. Words mean things. Words have power, whether it's for entertainment purposes or not. It has power. That's why we have to be mindful of what we consume and what we listen to, because when you say certain stuff, whether it's provocative or influential, impactful or not, there's certain people that, like, people are going to disagree. Some people are going to agree. My take on it, as far as, like, what Jay said about it, is like, okay, yeah, I agree. Because me, born in '87, I grew up. My first, I say this all the time. My first experience with hip hop was, House Party, Kid and Play, and then, of course, Will Smith and LL Cool J, who was already, like, doing films and movies and stuff. Ice Cube and all those things. But Kid and Play, that was my first experience that I recall with hip hop in general. Now, those that have seen the original House Party knows that there was the three pillars: DJing, which Martin was the DJ; breaking, which of course there was a lot of dancing in House Party; and also MCing, which Kid and Play, they was MCing. And even when they was battling, they was, you know, doing the battle, and even though there wasn't like it's not like not like certain battle raps now where they keep a score, but it's like, man, that's dope. We kind of feed off the crowd reaction. Kid and play, play play had got him what staying out the pops curfew, and he was kind of like messing around with him. Now that's friendly competition, because at the same time you're telling the truth, but you still have to, it was friendly competition. That is cool. That type of battling is cool, but of course they had music behind it. That's cool. But then when you fast forward into, again, I'm not a big battle rap head. I don't go running for battles, but you fast forward into the um Mook, Jay Mills, Sarah Jones, and Math Hoffa. You have uh Hitman Holla, Conceited, Charlie Clips. You got all these guys in the rap battles now, and even like in Wild 'N Out, they incorporated a lot of battling, and that it's entertainment, it's fun, it's cool. We doing points. Oh, that's hot. This guy, he got you on this one. He got you on this battle. You won the battle, and I think a lot of people will say you're just as good as your last rhyme or your last song or last project. And maybe sometimes people can just have whack bars. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're a whack rapper, but if it's a consistent thing, you have you'll have that. Now, also, I want to bring up, because I know people, they have mentioned, the Jay Z and Nas beef battle, and I remember when I was in high school, I think I might have been in ninth grade, 2001 or whatever, but I remember some of my classmates, they was talking about the rap. Now, mind you, I didn't really start becoming a hip hop head until late '90s. Like I said, I was listening to Fab. I was listening to the Hot Boys, um, and I was still kind of like on the modern rap now, like Fabulous. Then we go over to 50 Cent and not DMX, 50 Cent, Kanye West. Of course, at this time I didn't know Kanye West had writers, but I remember when I was in school, and then like I know some of my classmates were talking about the Jay and Nas beef, and I think they said, I guess they was talking about Ether. You know, Nas got Jay with Ether, and I'm gonna be honest. Um, if we're talking about just as far as the standard wise of battle rap, and what we know of battle rap, being aggressive, being strong and stuff, because when you listen to the words, Nas, because it's not something that I listen to on a day to day basis, so I don't remember, the bars behind it. But like, Nas was aggressive, with Ether. He ethered them. Ether became a verb. It became a word in the dictionary and everything like that. So it's like you have a top tier lyricist, and even at that time, Jay was a lyricist, but again, with Takeover and Super Ugly and all that stuff, it wasn't a lot of people didn't really acknowledge Jay being the winner. I still feel like Nas won. And part of that is because I am more of a Nas fan than a Jay fan. But again, it's not biased, because I've listened to both, and I'm like, okay, at that point in time, when you're a child, because that's what I was, a child in 2001. It was a rough year. You had 9/11 that happened in 2001, and just coming into a new school, getting adjusted to a new area, and all that stuff. It was a rough year. But when we're just talking hip hop, when we're speaking hip hop, I think about that, and they was talking about Jay can't be the person to say that because he was talking about leaving condoms in the baby seats. And this is when he was disannounced, and that's cool. I mean, you can, it's kind of funny how we always reference somebody's past when we're trying to prove a point. And I know he had talked about it. And I know he had talked about how I want to put emphasis on. He said anymore because, like I said, that was like 20 plus years ago, and the fact that people like they like Rory and Maul, Mecca, they would even reference that, which I get it, but it's like the Jay-Z then, that like he was active back then, and he grown. I mean, he's still he's still like I said, he's still like one of the goats, but I don't I don't personally feel like that's fair. But of course, when you're a big name in the game and you have classic albums, people are always going to hold you to a certain standard because again, KRS One, we know him as a teacher. Like I said, I wasn't somebody who was listening to KRS One, growing up or at all. Of course, we got guys like Big Daddy Kane and Rakim. Um, we got those rappers, and then we have the Run DMC rappers. Rest in peace to Jam Master Jay. But we have those type style rappers, and like I mentioned, the Kid and Play. There's different type of rappers. There's different styles of hip hop, and even though MCing is one of the main pillars of hip hop, you know, battling, cipher and just making songs. Those are all like subtitles of the MCing side. So me personally, just me, I'm not gonna speak for anybody else. I mean, if you feel like Jay was wrong in that regard, that's cool. But I will respectfully disagree because again, there's a lot of rappers who do not who aren't battle tested, but it doesn't necessarily determine that they're better. But again, there's that nuance, battle better, and it's when you're battling, when you're at war, or you're doing rhyming. There's like I said, there's battle rap artists. We got guys like Sue Surf, A Verb. They make music. Cassidy and Freeway. These guys come from the battle culture. They make songs. Not probably maybe not the best song, maybe not the best artists, but they rap their butt off. Like I said, you can be a rapper and not a lyricist. You can be a rapper and not do battles. Like I'm not familiar with his music, and maybe this is a bad example, but Little Yachty, he doesn't make battle music, and I mentioned this before on a previous podcast. we kind of know how he feels about hip hop and whatnot. But a lot of my favorite artists, like I said, Fab, L, Jay Nas, Lupe Fiasco. You got guys like Eminem. All these guys are um battle tested. I don't know if Lupe had battled anybody, but like I said, he like what he says, like, hey, I don't need him to battle anybody to like he's one of the top tier guys, and maybe I'm wrong. Somebody can correct me if you're listening. Maybe he did go head to head with somebody, but him like Lupe Fiasco, one of the greatest MCs ever, in my view. Um, Ace Hood. I know a lot of rappers they rap in a context of they're they're better. Like they rap in certain like a first person point of view, and they'll probably like yeah they the best and da 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 da. But again, that's what a lot of artists do. But it just goes a bit about as far as like what type of message you are. I know Kanye West was one of those guys as well. He's a producer turned rapper and whatever, and even he's not even turned rapper, but he is a rapper and a producer, and he had work. But it's like a lot of the guys in the game, even now, like I said, we had got one of the biggest battles in hip hop history with Kendrick and Drake. Now, I was able to live through that, to listen to all the songs. I still feel like um what was the song Drake did? Um that I can't even think of the name. Drop, 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 drop. What was that dang Drake song? So I see I can't even think of it right now. But to me, I feel like Kendrick won. Kendrick won the battle. I'll have to recognize that. I have to give it to Family Matters. I feel like yeah, Family Matters. I feel like Family Matters was the better song. It was the better song. It was the better. Sorry, excuse me. Hold on. Dang, these acid reflexes are kicking in. I feel like Family Matters was the better song out of the whole six verses exchange that they did, but I still feel like Kendrick won. Meet the Grand was cool. I like Not Like Us, but I don't think it was as good as people put it. But again, it's not up to me. That's what the masses say. But again, subjectively, if we're just talking like overall, like because again, I can acknowledge somebody being the better rapper and still you know like something else. So you have that, and and I mean we had a lot of battles. I mean Drake's battled Pure before, even before the put a thing. I think you know Pusha beat Drake. No, we Drake had dealt with two losses in the game, but he still makes better music. Like I said, just all depending on your taste. Like, see, the thing with me is I can listen to any type of music anywhere. I mean, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to be in the club, listening to one mic. I don't want to be driving in the car, listening to Luther. But I can listen to music anywhere. But again, it just goes again on my preference. It hits different when you're at different locations. And I'm not gonna say that there's not a place for battle rap And because apparently, because clearly there is. Again, we got Smack. We got King of the Dot. We got a lot of platforms. I think they canceled the Caffeine app, but it's cool. But I've been very, very subjective. Like there's times where, I like Drake over Kendrick. There's times where I like Cole over Kendrick. There's times where I like Kendrick over Drake. Times where I like Kendrick over Cole. There's times where, I might like Jay Z over Nas. Because that goes back into the same thing. It's always going to be tied in. I think Mecca mentioned this on his platform. It's like, once y'all are linked together, people are going to always compare it. We talk about the big three, Kendrick, Drake, and Cole. And we know that Cole, he had dropped an album with no features. And a lot of Cole fans will feel like that he's the best one out of the three. A lot of Drake fans will feel like Drake's the better out of the three. A lot of Kendrick fans will feel like Kendrick's out of the three. Everything's subjective. You see what I'm saying? So even when we go think about something that went beyond music, something that wasn't music related. I don't really think it was music related. Maybe it was music related, but Tupac and Biggie. Even though Biggie never really got a record, but there was still some retaliation. There's a lot of conspiracies behind the Tupac and Biggie thing. But the Tupac and Biggie thing wasn't necessarily in it. I guess it was somewhat music related. I mean, they was friends at one point. They was friends out in the industry. Like they kind of like same thing with maybe Cole and Kendrick, and they formed a friendship off of music, and then they got close, and then some lines were crossed. Tupac had said some things, and again, Pac being known as one of the realest dudes out there, had made speculations in regards to Diddy and Big, and that's neither. There's a lot of history that I'm not gonna address because I don't have all the facts with it. I don't know. I wasn't there. I was a kid. Like I said, I was a kid when Tupac and Biggie died. I was a kid when Jay and Nas battled. I was a kid for a lot of these battles in hip hop. Some stuff I'm not familiar with, but it's like most of the like 50 and Ja. I was a child, like I was in high school, but their beef isn't a music beef. It just trickled over into music. Maybe it could have started from off music from if you listen to like some of the stories, because I will say, based on what Josh said, no, there's been time where Josh said he didn't know him at first and he was trying to get on, but he was with the guy who robbed him and such and such and such. And I think 50 had made a point about that as well, as far as him trying to just saying what's up with him, but Ja wasn't trying to say what up with him because he would do that robbed him. That didn't have nothing to do with him, all that stuff. But yeah. So my thing is, and again, we can all pick and choose what we want to decide as far as who's better and who's this. And I know a lot of people, a lot of hip hop heads, a lot of people who have more connections, more more resources, more information than me will again feel differently about it. Me personally, and this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that me being a man of God doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just music is subjective, but words also mean things. Like I can go on without listening to any other diss records. Now, if somebody put it out, I'm gonna listen to it because I like rap. I like hip hop. I listen to instrumentals. I make up. my own songs. I flow, I rap too, to a degree, and I like rap. It doesn't have to do with anything about being a diss record, but like I said, somebody like if I'm a fan of you or if I'm familiar with you, and you put out a record that's dissing somebody, again, going back into how words mean things. Like, all right, I'm gonna listen to this record, this song, and I'm gonna listen to what you say. It's either whack or it's not whack because I'm not that invested in celebrities' lives like that. It's like, okay, he just dissed you. He went too far because again, I still feel like the T.I. 50 Cent thing to 50 Cent, all is fair in love, like all is fair in battles. Why did you have to bring in this man's wife? This is between me and him. This was about a verses that he didn't want to do, and it's like, okay, but if you mess with 50 Cent, if you say leave me alone, you can't tell somebody how far they can go. But again, when you bring somebody's wife up, gloves are off because and man as a man, me as a man, no matter how much I hate you, I'm not going to involve people that don't have anything to do with it because to me it's not right. But I'm about self defense though. I'm about self defense. Like if I'm not going that deep and beyond this fan. Like all right, I'm gonna go and travel back in time and kill you as a kid because when you grow up, you're gonna turn into this execution. It's kind of like the same thing with Wanted. Like when I was looking at this movie reaction of Wanted with the Real Rejects, and I know I was like, man, I kind of forgot all about that movie as far as how it all started. So it's like sometimes things that we things that we don't do can affect us in a bad way later. But just like things that we do can affect us. Like I even remember in the fall off, Cole had did his song and he was talking about the battle and he was using referencing his and Big and Pac's perspective, and it's like, okay, that's a very creative song. I mean, we can only assume because they're dead now and we don't have the word, but it's always going to go back to what people feel because people can say and feel whatever they want to feel. Only Lord knows, only God knows. So, like I said, I'm just making observation. I agree with what Jay Z said. Now in 2026, I don't think it matters. Maybe 20 years ago when him and Nas and them was doing it, maybe it did, but I still personally feel like it doesn't matter to me because I just like listening to rap. We can listen to rap without the negativity and everything, and regardless whether it's friendly competition or really on some wax mess, it's like I said, you're still saying stuff because again, Kendrick calling Drake a pedophile. That's that then that like you can't. This isn't you hitting you going beyond because the thing about it, and again, the hard part six whatever, but because again, there are people who may believe that. There are some people who may believe that, and not like us became a hit record. Not like us may have been bigger than Hit 'Em Up, and not like us may have became maybe one of the biggest commercial disc records of all time. Regardless of how I feel about it, regardless of how many people don't like it, This is what the numbers say. This is what the people react to. He performed at the Super Bowl. He performed at the Pop Out Show, repetitive times at the Pop Out Show. But again, so one individual, myself, doesn't determine what the culture needs or what the culture is based on. Again, I'm just expressing my observation like everybody else is expressing their observation. And right now I'm going against, you know, my better judgment because I really, like I said, I just had to get this off my chest. So on that I do agree with Jay-Z on that. But there was other things that he had mentioned in the interview that a lot of people may have not had addressed. But again, this is rap, this is hip hop, so Jay has become bigger than the culture, um, with what he contributed to to the game, but he is still part of the culture. Now, talk with Flea, with Cameron and J. Cole. I really loved that interview as well. Cam addressed how he had to get Cole's attention, and I feel Cole on that. Like he's like me and him, like him and Cam ain't close enough for to they're not close enough to kind of have what is that? They're not close enough to kind of like for them to kind of like know what it was. Like I said, I looked at all these like yesterday at work, so a lot of stuff is jumbled up. But um, when he was talking about the Kendrick and Jake thing, see, one thing about me is certain things will stick out, and I feel like that I am a hip hop head, so I'm gonna say like when Cole was talking about how he did talk to Drake and Kendrick after everything, but it wasn't a lot. I was like, I get it. I don't know if it was awkward for him or not, but I don't know if he. I mean, he like I said, he addressed his relationship. I mean, they have personal relationships. I don't want to say that they're because I was saying that they was friends, so he didn't want to date his friend. But I was saying that that was his that like that those his guys. But I think more so it's like okay, he was lying. He kind of got gassed up. He said he had two Kendrick songs that was gonna be on his album. I still kind of want to hear those songs because people had talked about how Kendrick and Cole was supposed to have did a joint project together and we never got it. So then we had got all this miscellaneous, compilations. But I still want to hear those two records. Maybe you can put it on deluxe. It's already got like 30 songs on it, but you can add two more songs. It ain't gonna hurt. But I understand what he said. Sometimes when you make a song and then you're addressing me and or referencing me in the record, and then now it's gonna because he was appeasing to the fans, to the people of the culture, because he knows how the world works. But again, it goes back again. You gotta stand on your square, yo. If you're wrong, be wrong, yo. Sometimes, especially when it comes to hip hop and rap, because that's just the energy that the culture brings. And I understand you can create a different space within the culture because again, we do have podcasts and we have these different news shows and stuff. But when you are when you're when you say things, because words mean things, language mean things. When you say certain things, and you put it out there for the world, everything changes. Because I said this too, like it's still on YouTube. There's still there's still like the song is still on YouTube, so it may not be on the album now, but it's still in the algorithm. So even with you apologizing, some people don't care as much as you apologizing. You apologizing, yeah, you this is where you stand at. But there are people who was like, look, you didn't delete it all. Like you deleted it off your project, but it's still in the algorithm. Now you don't have anything to do with that, but it's still out there. So imagine for somebody, cause like I said, I would not have known that he apologized if I wasn't on social media. Because there's certain things that says like social media, like Instagram and YouTube, to the my most used apps that I use. Like I see a lot of the clips on there. So some projects I know about from that. Because there was a time where, you know, I didn't know a project came out unless I went to the FYE store or the Target store, Walmart store. I didn't know that album was out because even when I was young, when I was watching TV, like I said, I didn't know I didn't have no way to get there. A lot of places that I lived at, they was within the area, but they wasn't like in walking proximity. But so social media is a big, resource for artists today. And even for myself, like I put music out, I put podcasts out, I put a lot of things out, and I don't promote myself as much as I probably should because I really just want people to kind of give it a listen, give it a shot, give it an ear. That's all I care about. I would enjoy the feedback and appreciate the feedback, but as long as you listen to it, let me get some feedback. How can I make this better? How do I but again, I always take heed to what people say. Now, if I follow through with a different approach to it, I might will and might not. But I'm always open to feedback, always open for critique because if I'm wrong about something that's subjective, I'm cool with that. See, music is subjective, but the fact of the matter is words mean things. Music is subjective, but the fact of the matter is words mean things. Meaning that I can have my personal opinion or perspective on someone's art, someone's project. What you say do matter though, but I have to determine whether or not I want to believe it or I don't want to believe it. But the fact is, you did say it, man. If you want to apologize and take it back, that's cool. That's your portion. That's your direction. Cool. Only God can judge you on that fact of whether or not you're forgiven in that aspect. But again, when it comes to certain things, because this is the thing that I'm still learning that arguing, constructive criticism is always going to be based on perception. So, like I've said, many like I've been saying this since it happened. I don't care, Cole. I like the song. I still feel like that was the best. Like even though you took it back, I still feel like that was the best track out of all the exchanges between Drake and Kendrick. But you took it back, so it's I guess you can say it's disqualified and it's null and voided. But I don't care, man. You can apologize, man. You can apologize again. Like I'm still a fan. And I'm gonna honestly say this. I know words mean things, but I don't base my life on what rappers say. No, as far as I'm concerned, all rappers are actors. You put on your rapper hat and you say what's the hottest thing that you can say. Words mean things, but sometimes people lie, and that's what it is. So I didn't make a big deal about Cole apologizing. I mean, regardless, like you can be a hip hop head or not, like let him apologize. Let him not stand on what he said, or like how does that affect you as a person? How does that affect you and what you got going on? Moving on to Charlemagne and Clarisha. Clarisha, Clarisha, Young Miami, good interview, very mature interview. I do appreciate that. I appreciate Young Miami's honesty and transparency. I I don't know if she'll ever hear this, but I can only hope because again, I go back again, just my perspective and observation because she had said something particularly as far as like dealing with, sometimes, when Charlamagne was like, sometimes people kind of works so much to kind of cover up their trauma. And I know Young Miami has said, she's not ready to deal with that. Like I said, she's a mother. She talked about how when her mother was in jail or prison or whatever, she had to take care of her siblings or her children and all that. But and that's hard. I know I got people in my life that does that now. It's hard, you know. It's hard sometimes even with one child. Now, and I don't know when she had her children. I know she talked about her 12-year-old son a lot. A lot of it. Excuse me. She talked about that a lot, and I want to say this to her, Young Miami, beautiful, successful woman from Dade County, Florida. You have a bright future ahead of you. You had talked about losing some deals and money, dealing with Diddy and everything. That's kind of how that's business. You know, now regardless of how people perceive you based on the music that you make, never let nobody tell you that you can't do something. But I do want to say that you may not be ready to deal with the trauma. And like Charlemagne said, sometimes the trauma will deal with you. You know, you said Diddy had got you, like kind of helped you to get in church. That's great. If you don't have a spiritual advisor or a spirit or somebody that you go to for advice or elder that you can go to for advice, um, get one. I oftentimes had, to go to my parents, disagreed or not, I still ask for, some guidance and wisdom. Because as somebody who had experienced trauma and not realizing that it was trauma, I ended up in a, what is that? I'm sorry. I had ended up in a state of mind where I was alone And I know I'm not alone. I know God got it. But you have. I'm sure that you have a community of people that love you that can help you get through with it, like to deal with that. You gotta work. That's what you gotta do. You got responsibility. You got children. You have bills. You have these things you gotta do with. But take some time to yourself to reflect on your life and what you want out of life. For me personally, I do that on a daily basis because again, like I guess I'm never like I'm content with my life now because I know that I'm doing the best that I can. I have to take these some days off for my mind because it's like that's just me, and I'm trying to be better at it. Again, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm just somebody who actually cares about people. But yeah, just try to take it one day at a time, but deal with the trauma that you have. It's not easy to lose someone, especially somebody who's been helping you, whether with your kid, with your business stuff. Like rest in peace to your children's father, um, and whatever relationship you and Diddy have. He and he can be a new person now before all this has happened. So Lord's will, you know, even if nothing continues on between y'all romantically, just be there as a friend, as somebody who knows and loves him as who he is today. We all have to, pay for the sins that we have committed. Um, so yeah, but that's that. Great interview. Not gonna talk too much as far on that, but I just wanted to get a couple things off my chest. I might I think I'm gonna post it up. Like I said, it's Friday now. I gotta see what other music came out because again, I forgot I had dropped my project, off the hook. Just a collective of hooks I wrote. I I had actually I've actually saw the Tyrese and Tank versus. It was cool. It was good. I did expect more from it, but I mean it is what it is. But but one thing that I'm gonna do, is a lot of good music dropping. I'm just sitting here looking at the playlists right now. Neo got a new song out, Up, Out and Gone. I'm gonna listen to that in a little bit. I'm gonna add that to my library. Um, oh, Justine Scott got a new album out, Candy. Alan Walker, Chief Keef. I don't really care about Chief Keef. Fetty Wap got a new project out. Man, see, blessed ones. Y'all stay safe, stay productive, and positive. This is Blair. I'm out. One.